Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today we're tackling some pretty big questions, huh? The whole meaning of life thing and suffering, what it all means, that kind of stuff.
The big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got two pretty incredible sources to help us unpack it all. We're going to be looking at the book of Job, that ancient story about a guy who loses everything.
Right.
And then we'll jump way ahead in time to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Powerful book.
Super powerful. It's about finding meaning, right? But in the face of something as horrific as the Holocaust.
Yeah. What really struck me, and I think this is what makes this deep dive so interesting, is that both of these works are trying to figure out the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, how do we deal with suffering? What do we do when things just suck?
Exactly. And how do we find meaning even when it feels like there's none to be found?
Right. I mean, thousands of years apart, and these guys are wrestling with the same questions. It's wild, isn't it? And they come at it from such different angles. In Job, for example, we see these conversations between Job and his friends, right? All trying to make sense of his suffering.
Oh, yeah. And they all have their own opinions.
Oh, absolutely. But one of those friends, Eliphaz, I think he's got a pretty interesting take on things.
Oh, for sure. Eliphaz, he's in chapter 5, and he's basically saying, look, suffering comes straight from God. It's all part of the plan. He even says affliction doesn't just come from the dust, it's not random. It's
Purposeful.
yeah. It's got a divine purpose.
And that leads Eliphaz to think that if you question your suffering, you're basically questioning God, right?
Whoa. Okay, so just accept it.
Pretty much. Just trust in God's wisdom and roll with it.
I don't know, though. It's tough for me to swallow that. I get the whole trusting in a higher power thing, but doesn't that kind of, I don't know, diminish the individual's experience?
Right.
Like, where's the room for personal growth? Figuring things out on your own.
I totally see what you mean. Like, your
Yeah.
suffering has to mean something, right? And not just because it's part of some grand cosmic plan.
Exactly. Like, how do I learn from this? How do I grow? It can't just be over.
It's a good point. And it gets even more interesting when you remember who Eliphaz is. He's supposed to be helping Job, right, offering advice.
Right.
But as the story goes on, you realize that maybe his advice isn't so great after all. It's like he's saying that human life, well, that it doesn't really have meaning on its own.
Wow. So we're just puppets. That's kind of bleak.
A little bit, yeah. So then you've got Viktor Frankl, right? He goes through hell on earth in the concentration camps. But he comes out of it with this completely different view.
Yeah. I mean, talk about different perspectives.
Right. And
Right.
Frank, he's a psychiatrist, so he's really thinking deeply about all this. And what he focuses on is the power of choice, even in the most awful, unimaginable situations.
It's incredible. I remember reading about how he could have escaped to America,
Yeah.
but he chose to stay in Austria to care for his parents. Talk about responsibility.
Yeah. Incredible. And then, after he survives the camps, he says he had two options: suicide or finding meaning in what he'd been through.
I mean, how? How do you even begin to find meaning in something like that?
That's the thing. Frankl didn't just find meaning. It wasn't just sitting there waiting for him.
Okay, so he made it.
He created it. Through his choices, he believed that even when everything is stripped away, we still have a choice in how we respond, in the attitude we have. It's about finding that meaning inside ourselves, not waiting for it to come from outside.
Okay, so it's not about accepting suffering. It's about using it to find meaning.
Exactly. It's active. It's about taking control, even if it just feels like you're controlling your own thoughts.
That's so different from what Eliphaz was saying, the whole divine will thing. It's
Yeah.
like the two opposite ends of the spectrum.
It is, right? And Frankl's perspective is so powerful because it's not just theory. He lived it. He saw it in other prisoners, too. People who found ways to keep hope alive. Little acts of kindness, sharing what little food they had. They chose to make their lives meaningful even when they were staring death in the face.
It almost makes you think that maybe the book of Job, it was like preparation.
Preparation.
Yeah, like for something as awful as the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Like it was showing us these different ways to think about suffering, to try and make sense of it.
Wow. That's really interesting. It does make you think about how timeless these questions are, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're still asking them today.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Frankl's work so important, because it forces us to ask, how can we apply these ideas to our own lives?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in our own little problems, right?
Well,
To think, why me? But Frankl's saying we always have a choice, even if it's just choosing how we react to something.
it's that inner strength, that resilience.
And maybe, just maybe, that's where we find meaning. Not in the suffering itself, but in how we choose to deal with it.
I think you're right. It's about finding that purpose that goes beyond our circumstances.
Wow, so this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
And, for anyone listening who wants to explore these ideas further, I really recommend checking out Man's Search for Meaning. It's a pretty amazing book.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
See ya.